اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والقاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق وهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره مقدار العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. الحمد لله رب العالمين. أفضل الصلاة وتام تسليما على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ورضي الله تعالى عن أهل السادة التابعين علماء عاملين وأئمة أربعين مجتهدين مقلديهم إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Yes. It's the interpreter right here. So inshallah, I'm gonna continue where I left off yesterday, and possibly next Thursday I'll finish up, and we'll be looking for the Hilal next Thursday, inshallah. It'll be the 29th day, the 30th night of Ramadan next Thursday. I mean, the time flying. And inshallah ta'ala, even if we see the Hilal, I'm still gonna go on to finish up the text. And even if we don't see the Hilal, I'm gonna still finish up the text, because if we don't see the Hilal, then Friday will be the 30th day of Ramadan, and Eid will be Saturday, inshallah ta'ala. All right, so as continues from talking about the miracles of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the many countless thousands of miracles that that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had did. Even though, however, the Sheikh he mentioned a few of the miracles, and among them is that he Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam poured his leftover wudu water into the well of Quba, and it never diminished afterwards. He spat in the well. He spat in the well that was in the house of Nas, and afterwards there was no water in Medina sweeter than it. So this is from the sweat of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the spit of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Was sweet. Also, his fragrance, his sweat was what was the most beautiful fragrance that you could ever smell. And like I mentioned last week, one of the women from the Ansar that sold perfume in Medina, she used to gather the sweat of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and put it in her ifif, in a attar, and sold her attar with the sweat of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mixed with it for more money. I mean, it was worth more. It was even worth more than what she was charging for it. Once Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was passing by some salty water, and it became sweet, right? And he gave his tongue to Al Hassan and Hussein to suck. This is when they was young. They was young babies, right? When they were very thirsty, and they were able to quench their thirst with the saliva from his tongue. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave Ukasha a stick of wood when his sword broke in the Battle of Badr. It became a sharp gleaming sword. And he gave Abdullah ibn Jash a palm stick when he lost his sword in the Battle of Uhud, which it turned into a sword. And he Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wiped the blood from the face of Adha ibn Amr when he was wounded in the Battle of Hunain, and he thus had a blaze of hair. He wiped the head of Qais ibn Zayd al-Juhadami, When he died at the age of one at the age of at the age of 100, he all his hair was white except for the place where the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam where the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had touched. It was still black. It was still black while he was at 100, and every other part of his hair on his head was gray. This is also told by Amr ibn Thalaba al-Juhayni. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wiped the face of Qatada ibn Milhan, and his face had a shine like a mirror. All right, and he placed his palm on the head of Handala ibn Hudaim and blessed him. And whoever had a swell, and it was placed on the spot that the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam palm had touched, the swelling would vanish. All right, whoever was swollen. Whenever someone was touched with madness or illness, came to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he would touch them, they would be healed. The people were thirsty on the day of Hudaybiyah, and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam placed his hands in the water vessel. At the time, there were very little water in it. Then water flowed from between his fingers, and the people quenched their thirst and made wudu. Their numbers were 1,500. All right, a Bedouin came to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and said, "By what can I know that you are a Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam?" He said, "I will call the cluster of dates from the palm tree to testify that I am the messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam." So the messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam called it, and the cluster descended until it came near the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he said to it, "Return," and then return, and the Bedouin became Muslim. So among the signs of the miracles of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, one of the signs of the miracles of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is that he foretold about what harm would befall the Ahlul Bayt, and about their slaughter, and other than that. And he Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he said the most wretched of people will be the one who would dye the beard of Ali with blood. And he said that Ali would be a portioner of the fire. His friends awliya will go to the garden, and his enemies to the fire. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam foretold that Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu will be killed while reading the Quran, and his blood will fall on the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if anyone knows about the martyrdom of Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, is that he had made an oath that he would never raise his sword to anyone who had prostrated, who had made sujood. And when the assassins came to kill Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, he was reading the Quran. And so much so they chopped his hands off. And you're gonna say chopped his hands off, and this was the blood that splashed on the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah is enough for you. Allah is enough for you against them. This is the words that his blood splashed on. Here's the hearing and the knowing. And the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam foretold that trials and sedition would not appear as long as Umar was alive. He also foretold that the war that Zubair would wage against Ali radiallahu anhu would wage against Ali radiallahu anhu. The war that Zubair would wage against Ali radiallahu anhu. Allah be pleased with both of them. He Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also foretold that the dog of Hawab will bark at one of his wives, and many would be killed around her. It became true of Aisha radiallahu anha on the day of the camel. The interesting thing about this is that Aisha radiallahu anhu, she knew about this this prediction of she, you know what I'm saying. Matter of fact, she narrated, but she didn't know that it was her, it was talking about her. And then she participated in the battle of the camel against Ali radiallahu anhu, and she made Toba after that, after she finished, because she realized that the ijtihad that Ali radiallahu anhu had made was the correct ijtihad, and she made Toba from it. You know, so you know this is even though these are like points to where it gives me some little insight of what this was, many of these predictions are related to. And the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he foretold that Ammar would be killed by an unjust group. It was the companions of Muawiyah which killed him. He said about a group that included Abu Huraira, Sumayra ibn Jundub, and Hudayfa. The last of you will die in the fire. Samura was accidentally burned by fire in which he died. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said that the Caliphate will remain with the Quraysh as long as they establish the deen. He foretold, saying, there will be from Thaqif a liar and a destroyer. They were Al Hajjaj bin Yusuf and Al Maktur ibn Ubayd. Now Hajjaj bin Yusuf, he was a tyrant, you know, man, and he was one of the, I think he was the governor of Basra, and you know what I'm saying, it was one of his one of his atrocities is that he had ransacked Medina, and you know what I'm saying, the no, he had ransacked Mecca, and the blood flowed. He was one of the people who had Abdullah ibn Zubair ibn Al-Wam radiallahu anhu had him killed, because during that time people had gave bay'ah to Abdullah ibn Zubair, and they had gave bay'ah to Yazid, and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he had said that if there was two Khalifas, then you know what I'm saying, kill one of them. So you know what I mean, it was people in Mecca, they gave bay'ah to Ibn Zubair, and you know, they, you know what I'm saying, Hajjaj bin Yusuf came with the army, and he had ransacked Mecca, and Abdullah ibn Zubair, he was in Mecca. You know, also the way that the Quran is right now, how it looks with the harakat and the vowels and the shaddas and everything that's related to in regards to reading, how to read the Quran in Arabic. Hajjaj bin Yusuf was the one who had suggested to put these harakat and vowels and stuff in the Quran, right? So the non-Arab speaking or non-Arab reading person, they'll be able to learn Arabic and learn how to read the Quran with the help of these vowels. The Arabs already knew. The Arabs already knew where these vowels and harakahs and everything taskil goes in the Quran. So even though he was tyrannical, and Hassan al-Basri, he had said that it was possible that Hajjaj bin Yusuf had made Toba before he died. But when he died, he had Allah Ta'ala caused live vermin to eat him away from eat his stomach up. I mean, just, you know what I mean, because of the dua of Sa'ad ibn Jubair, right? Read it all in. You know what I'm saying? He had, when Hajjaj bin Yusuf, had killed him. When that incident happened to him when he was dying, he said this is as a result of the dua of Sa'id ibn Jubair. So the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also one of the he didn't make the prediction, but this is what Jibril descended and had told him about the demise of his grandsons. One day, the Prophet ﷺ was sitting in the masjid, and Hassan came in, and he kissed Hassan on his lips. They were very young. And then after Hassan came in, Hussein came in behind him, and the Prophet ﷺ kissed him on his neck. Mind you, everyone that the Prophet ﷺ loved, they preceded him in death. Everyone that he loved, they preceded him in death. In the way that the ones that he extremely greatly loved. So when after he had kissed the lips of Hassan and kissed the neck of Hussein, Jibril alayhi salatu wasalam descended and told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one whose lips that you kiss, they will be poisoned. And if you know how Hassan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib had died, his wife had poisoned him. His wife had poisoned him as a result of seeking dunya. She, she had thought that Muawiyah was gonna marry her, and she poisoned Hassan. But this was right after Hassan had gave the Khilafate, made peace between the Muslims from the civil war of fighting each other, and gave the Khilafate to Muawiyah, right? And this, and this was stop the Muslims from fighting each other, from killing each other. And then he said that the one whose neck that you kissed, it will be severed. And so we all know the martyrdom of Hussein alayhi salam radiallahu anhu, that in the battle of in Karbala, one of the narrators of hadith that Imam Bukhari narrated hadith from, he sat on his chest, and he chopped his head off. And this was after he was filled with 85 arrows, and he was fighting fighting profusely, fighting off the people, that had turned on him in Karbala, because he was on him and 87 of the people of the house of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and servants. They was going to Kufa, because the people of Kufa had promised that they would give bay'ah to him, right? And Yazid, he had commanded the army to go capture them and bring them to him. He didn't command them to kill him. All right, so the people who had made him this promise in Kufa, they had turned on him, and as a result, he it's in the family of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and their servants, they were wiped out. Some was taken captive, and the only surviving male relative to survive was Ali ibn Hussein Zainul Abidin ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. He was the only male survivor, and from him is where some of the virtues of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had mentioned about, those will be up under the shade of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala when there's no more shade. He had some of them characteristics. So this is what this is one of the things that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had also foretold, and he also knew that demise. So all right, so the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he had foretold that Allah Ta'ala would destroy Musaylima, and that Fatima radiallahu anha alayhi salam would be the first of his family to follow him to the grave. The tafsir of Surah Al-Nasr, the tafsir of Surah Al-Nasr, either Ja'a Nasrullahi wal Fath. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was mentioning this to Fatima radiallahu anha, and she was crying. And he explained to her that this surah was prophesizing his death, and that she started crying. He told her, he said, "But you will be the first from my family to follow me." And she died 6 months later, and um, she was supposedly pregnant before she had returned to Allah. In fact, you know what I mean, she, you know what I'm saying, she died like 6 months later. You know what I'm saying? This was like uh, um, a very hard time. You know what I'm saying? A very hard time for Fatima Zahra alayhi salam radiallahu anha. You know, so um, when he had told her that you'll be the first to follow me from my family, she smiled. You know, so the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he also foretold that the existence of Uwais al-Qarni, and that there will come from there will come amirs who will be delayed, who would delay the prayer beyond its time. He Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also foretold of the appearance of the Qadariya and the Rafida, and that the Ansar would diminish until they became like the salt of salt in food, and that the Ansar would meet with despotism after him. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He said concerning El Hassan, this son of mine is a master, Sayyid of Allah, and Allah will make peace between two mighty groups from amongst the Muslims through him. Like I had mentioned, that he had gave the Khilafah from the Khilafah from him, gave it to Muawiyah. And the Prophet ﷺ had also foretold of the killing of Hussein, uh, alayhi salam. He foretold, saying that a city will be built between the Tigris and Dujal and Kuturubul and As-Sirat. The treasures of the earth will be brought to it, which the earth will be swallowed up. Clearly meaning by that Baghdad. The miracles of the Prophet ﷺ are like a sea without a shore, and that they have been recorded in many books. Whoever desires to examine them, let him study Kitabul Shifa of Qadi Iyad. So then, inshallah, subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. So inshallah ta'ala, next week I will finish the text, and you know what I'm saying, everyone have a good night. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.